Hey, so I want to make this a quick live, but this is something I was just thinking. I was sitting here um, working on my lesson plan and kind of rounding out the textbooks that I'm writing to be inclusive of some more Central African and South African and West African information. And while I was doing that, I was simultaneously, because in my house, as far as things that my children are allowed to watch go, they don't watch television. They don't have a television to watch, but I do kind of pre watch things. And there's a book series that I've always really loved when I was a little girl called Anne of Green Gables. And there's also Anne with an E. It's a really old book series. I always wished in the Black community we would get away from telling, stories of Black people overcoming stuff, and just tell like plain stories that had just good, wholesome messages in them. I think so much of our entertainment as Black people is geared toward lasciviousness and slavery and coming out of the ghetto, and we don't just get to tell stories like human stories sometimes. Not saying that those things aren't human, just saying we aren't given the benefit of humanity. Our stories are always tied to a racial struggle. Anyway, so I'm going to get to the point of this video, but so I'm listening to this and I'm working on my textbooks. I do Afrocentric history books. And so I was rounding that out and preparing for my classes tomorrow. And um, I'm watching this to see if it's going to be good for my kids. And the first few episodes are wonderful. I'm like, this is going to be great for the kids. Um, it's very wholesome. There's nothing inappropriate in it. And then I get to like the third episode of the thing because I'm going to watch it all, right? Because you never know what's going to be included and what your children are going to see. And so in the episode, the little girl, for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, is an orphan and she's been in a lot of abusive situations. So she's been beaten up. Um, she's been made to play mother to, the children of other families. She's seen a lot of sexual things. And they don't explicitly show this, but in this particular scene, she's at a school and she sees an adult male teacher being inappropriate with a young girl. And he's touching the girl's hand and rubbing on her, not sexually, but in an intimate way. And so, even though this little girl is only 13 years old, she was with a family where the intimate relations of the husband and wife were something that she understood in like a childlike way. And so she was telling the little girl with her as she's watching this teacher be inappropriate, oh, well, maybe they're making a baby, because men have a mouse in their pocket. And if women play with their mouse, now she doesn't know the proper terms or even what a mouse is, but she's telling the other little girl, even, if a woman plays with the mouse, one of the families that used to abuse her said, she got twins, right, from her husband from playing with her husband's mouse. And so the little girls all sit down and they're having lunch together. And the one little girl who doesn't understand it any more than she did, she's trying to help her make friends. And she's like, oh, I told her about, I told all the other little girls about the mouse thing. Tell them what you saw. And so she starts to tell them what she saw. And then they want more details. So she starts to tell them about this abusive home that she lived in, right? And in this abusive home, she says that the man of the house got really drunk. He was a drunkard, is how she described him. And he'd get drunk and he'd stomp through the house, like a giant, and everybody would run. And then he would grab his wife and they'd go in the room. And sometimes the lady would make sounds like she was happy and they were having fun. And other times it sounded like he was killing her. And then, after she played with, her husband's mouse, talking about the older couple, the missus of the house always seemed really sad. So all the parents hear that this little girl has told this story. All the parents of this little town hear the story that this little girl has told. And the mothers come to the family that adopted her and they're like, you need to take your daughter out of school. She's disgusting. She's vile. She needs to be homeschooled. We don't want her around our children. And the woman of the house, because it's a brother and sister who adopted this little girl, he's like, the sister is like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, how embarrassing that she's out here behaving like that. And the brother goes, I'm angry. And the woman's like, I'm angry too. He's like, I'm angry that that little girl who should be innocent has seen those things. He said she knows things that no child her age should know. And so he's near tears, not because of what the little girl did. He's in tears because he realizes the type of life that this poor child must have lived for her to even know something like that, right? For her to even have a knowledge of that. He's upset and he's angry by the fact that somebody has violated her innocence that way. And so the woman looks up and she realizes, you're right. The bigger issue isn't how she's behaving. The bigger issue is what a terrible thing that this child has suffered. And that got me thinking about something I was thinking earlier in the day, which is, people have a lot of hatred toward children. And people who are vile, adults who have vile minds, they twist and they contort the things that children do into a reason to not afford children innocence. This could be an adult man contorting the sexual behavior of a young girl in a way that makes him feel that sexual access to her is valid, versus a mature adult response is to feel a level of compassion and pain and concern when you see that a child is not functioning like a child, when you see that a child has been damaged. Now, you guys know that there are limitations to the acquiescences I will give children, but they are in extreme cases, right? I think a lot of people, and this got me thinking of like parenting and how vile society has become. You guys know I love women, I love children, and yes, I love men, but as a woman, I really care deeply for women and I care deeply for children. And it got me thinking how vile and disgusting society has become, where everybody is so self centered and so self focused and really repulsive. Our culture is so repulsive to me that when people talk about why they don't want children, when people talk about the burden that children are, what they're really saying is we are only capable of appreciating people who give something to us, right? They have a value to us. And children, our job is to give to them, right? And a lot of people cannot appreciate a relationship because they're so self centered. They can't appreciate a relationship where the basis of the relationship isn't somebody giving to you, isn't somebody being present to contribute to you, but that the joy of dealing with children, the joy of being a mother or a father, is that you are giving to somebody else. It's beyond us to imagine going 18 years or our entire lives, because your children, if you're lucky, outlive you, where the relationship is where you pour into another person. Most people are unhappy as parents, and most people dislike children because it is a relationship where you are constantly pouring into them. Their job is not to pour into you. And the joy that we get when we deal with children, it really comes from the fact that when we pour into children in healthy ways, the reward is in seeing the development of a beautiful and happy and healthy child. And some of us, most of society, and it disgusts me to have to say this, are such vile and disgusting, selfish, horrible people that they literally hate the idea of parenthood. They hate the idea of children because they cannot see the joy in constantly pouring into another person without that person being capable of reciprocating in ways that are tangible to them. Most of us can't see the benefit in simply being good and loving to another person, even though they cannot give that back. And children can't really give you the same things back that you give them. And I was just sitting here thinking about, as I was deciding what my kids could watch, and I read this book series when I was young, but I just thought about like that judgment. And even when we talk about children, how we attribute adult qualities to children. We don't have the attitude of this child didn't have a person to pour into them in a healthy way. I think so many of us come from environments where we may have been violated or abused, and even people like us who know what it's like to not have adults pour things into you in a healthy way, but they pour their toxicity, they pour their violence, they pour their sexual attraction, they pour their drug addictions, they pour their selfishness into us as children. And we know what it's like to live lives as children where adults aren't constantly pouring beauty and love and happiness into us and self-confidence into us. We know what it's like. And then we grow up and we become adults who are equally as vile and disgusting and self-centered. And we feel no shame for it. We feel no shame at all. We rob children of the ability to be children. We incorporate them into our rhetoric. We justify our abuses of them. And then we all pat each other on the back and talk about what a burden it is. And none of us are disgusted with each other. None of us just sit around and go, you know what? We are really vile, terrible creatures. What is so very broken in us that this is the way we approach our logic when it comes to little ones? I was sitting and like as I'm writing the textbook, I'm always thinking about propagandizing, right? Because if you're writing a textbook, then this is your opportunity as you teach to propagandize children. And I'm like, so little is known about Central Africa. Yes, I'm jumping subjects, but I'll bring it full circle. So little is known about Central Africa. So little is known about West Africa, the historiography of it, especially that early history in the same time that, Egypt and Nubia and all of these African civilizations that really most American Black people have no association with genetically. And so I'm writing, and how can I express to the children that there's no shame in us knowing nothing about their direct ancestry and the need for us to investigate it? And so I start to write, right? And I'm going to read you an excerpt from from the textbook that I'm writing. It says, another reason for our limited archaeological understanding of the region is the rainforest. The African rainforest covers at least a third of Central Africa. It is second in size only to the Amazon and, as we discussed in our geography chapter, is one of the two lungs of the earth. Beautiful as it is, the rainforest poses unique archaeological challenges that make excavating in the environment very difficult. Similar difficulties have been faced in the Amazon, and in the past 10 years, as of the writing of this book, previously undiscovered civilizations in the Amazon that once had populations in the millions have been discovered. With archaeologists anticipating even more are hidden under centuries of forest growth. The same is likely the case with Central Africa. However, the research is yet to be done to uncover these areas of historical archaeological riches. And then I go on to talk about why we know so little about Africa, that it's not just the rainforest, right? But that the diaspora has done little research into this area, that we don't have the infrastructure for archaeological research, that there's political instability in the area that prevents us from going in, and that when things are found, they're poorly documented. And so, in this attempt to teach, I'm also attempting to encourage the children and instill in them that it's our responsibility as the Black diaspora to investigate these areas so that there's not shame associated with not being from North Africa or East Africa, that we don't feel we lack a culture simply because people don't know it, because our ancestors are from Central and West Africa. And so I'm thinking about this propagandizing as I am writing this textbook, wanting to make sure that the children found value in their history, and don't feel as though Egypt and Nubia are all that matter when their genetic testing will tell them they're not from those places. They're from the parts of Africa where people pretend nothing ever existed. Nothing valuable, at least. Not in the distant ancient past. And so, why do I say all this? I say it because if we're to be healthy minded as a community in everything we do, be that educationally, be that looking at children's challenges, we have to recognize that however children turn out when they become adults, and yes, I understand all children will become adults at some point, that our job is to pour good things into children. And when we find that a child hasn't had good things poured into them, it's not because they are inherently evil or sexual. It's not because they are mature, because maturity in a child is not a badge of honor. Maturity in a child is often pointing to a lack of protection because a child has had to learn to emulate and understand and process adult things because nobody gave them the privilege of childhood. And we have to start looking at ourselves and asking ourselves, are we vile, selfish? Do we approach the situations when we have our conversations from a healthy place? Are we like the parents that I described in that town when they heard this little 13-year-old girl telling this disgusting story about men's mouses and the pockets and what happens when women touch them? Do we look at that child and we think that that's evidence of how disgusting they are? Or do we look at that child and we think that that is evidence that somebody has violated something that should be precious and protected, which is childhood? Anyway, so I am going to probably approve that episode for the children. We'll skip over the part where that is explained so explicitly, and I will explain it to the kids in my own words. And then what I do when my kids watch things is then we discuss the concepts. And I plan to discuss the concepts with my children much like I discuss them with you here, which is, what type of person do you want to be? Some people are very damaged. We don't know the extent or the stories behind that. And I tend to not focus on adults because it's hard to get adults to be introspective in any way, shape, or form because adults are hell bent on pointing the finger at everybody else. And interestingly enough, the one group of people who could really point the finger, we never do anything but point fingers at them, and that is children. And I was just sitting here thinking that. And I do have to get back to the textbook because those of you who are aware, last year I shared how far I gotten in the textbook with my members and my patrons, and then I lost my entire document. And so this year I have been obviously rewriting my textbook, revising my textbook, and trying to keep up with my curriculum. So I do have to get back to work because I want to make sure that this is as well polished as it can be before the children lay their eyes on it. And my little ones that I teach over at the Zayix Institute, and shout out to Brother Q for setting the institute up. Um, they are my little proofreaders. So whenever I make a mistake, they're so cute. They'll say, Miss Irene, you put two ors there, or that sentence doesn't make any sense. And so all of these little kids are kind of like my editors. And we kind of edit the text as we go. And so, anyway, I wanted to take a second look at this, but I was just sitting here working on that. And like I said, multitasking, also proofing something for my children, which I don't know how many parents are like me and you guys watch and read things before your children do, but do that because you never know what's in there that your child shouldn't be seeing. We can't just trust the rating system, right? But, I want you guys to think about what kind of person, and I think about this too. I'm not just pointing the finger outward. Like these are things I have to think about too. What kind of person am I? I'm really fortunate, and many of you may be the same, where I had a very privileged childhood monetarily, but a very difficult childhood as far as how I was treated. And so luckily, I came out of that being like feeling super protective for children. But some of us are so damaged by our past that we come out of that and we become the very types of people that harmed us. And maybe we don't even realize it because we've just become hard to the world because that's what we had to do to protect ourselves, right? But maybe if we take a look at ourselves, we can fix our approach. I've been seeing a lot of studies on how people view parenting, how people view children, and the world has such a negative attitude toward little ones and sees no value in them. And I guess it takes a certain kind of person to see value in people who can't do for you. You can only do for them. And if we aren't the type of people that can find joy and happiness in doing for children, despite the fact that they can't reciprocate, then maybe what we're really saying about ourselves is we are completely selfish. And I'm not saying you have to want children. I'm saying we all have to interact with them, right? And if we can't see a value in pouring into somebody simply for the sake of being good people, we can only see the benefit in pouring into somebody when they can give something back. Then I think that's the height of selfishness and self-centeredness. And many of us are selfish and self-centered. And it is a vile quality that in me and you and everybody, we have to check here and there. But it's also a quality that can lead to a lot of dangerous things. It can lead to many dangerous things. It can lead to our abuse of children and conversations that are abusive toward children. The easiest one, like I said, is, the one that makes me the sickest, right, is when I hear conversations where men are saying that, children can be sexually available to them based on their behavior and their choices because something is dead inside of those men that they don't recognize a broken child when they see one. They only see an opportunity for pleasure. And I'm using that as an example, but even as women, be we men or women, when is the last time you looked at a broken child and all you saw was an opportunity to do more damage versus feeling a level of compassion and a desire to pour into that broken child and try to repair the things that are broken there? When do we transfer our adult desires and our adult angers onto children without realizing it? I was just sitting here thinking that. I gave the context for why I was thinking that 3 times during this live, so I won't do it again. But it was something that, you know, I felt so sad about as I thought it. And I just wanted to talk to you guys about it. I don't think this will be a popular live, it's not drama filled, but I think it's an important conversation. And I'm interested to hear your your thoughts on it too, right? I'm interested to hear what you guys think on it too. But anyway, I really do have to get back to doing my lesson plan. So I will talk to you guys later. And I apologize. I wasn't reading the comments section at all because I'm just caught up in my own head here. But maybe we can pick up this as a back and forth conversation another time. You guys let me know what you think. I'll talk to you later.